Robert Redford was one of the greatest names in modern Hollywood. The 89-year-old actor died early this morning.
On a quiet morning in the spring of 2025, news rippled across the globe like a stone cast into still water. Robert Redford, the golden-haired icon who defined American cinema for 6 decades, had passed away at his beloved Sundance home at the age of 89. Within hours, tributes flooded social media. Stars, politicians, and ordinary fans sharing memories of Butch Cassidy, All the President's Men, and The Sting. The world paused to mourn a man who seemed to embody the very best of Hollywood's golden age: integrity, artistry, and an unshakable commitment to truth. But as the public mourning began, a different story was unfolding behind closed doors. Estate lawyers, family members, and archivists descended upon Redford's properties, beginning the somber work of cataloging a lifetime's accumulation. What they discovered wasn't simply the expected assets of a wealthy celebrity. Instead, they uncovered a labyrinth of secrets, hidden collections, unfinished creative projects, and financial complexities that would take years to unravel. Some findings celebrated his genius and generosity. Others revealed uncomfortable truths about debt and legacy. This wasn't just an estate, it was a time capsule, a museum, and a mystery all rolled into one. The scale of what emerged shocked even those who knew him best. Priceless Native American artifacts hidden in storage for decades, secret philanthropic bequests totaling millions, personal letters that rewrote the history of Hollywood friendships, and beneath it all, a web of debts and legal entanglements that cast unexpected shadows over his carefully crafted legacy. Robert Redford's estate would prove as complex and contradictory as the man himself, part visionary artist, part shrewd businessman, part environmental crusader, and entirely unforgettable. High in Utah's Wasatch Mountains, where pine forests meet alpine meadows and cold streams carved through ancient rock, sits the property that Robert Redford called home for more than half a century. The Sundance estate wasn't just real estate, it was a physical manifestation of his soul. Rustic log structures blended seamlessly with the landscape, designed to honor rather than dominate the natural world. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed mountain vistas like living paintings. Hand-carved wooden beams, stone fireplaces, and Native American textiles created spaces that felt both elegantly simple and profoundly intentional. Redford purchased this land in 1969, long before he became Hollywood royalty, paying just $500,000 for 2,000 acres of pristine wilderness. At the time, developers were circling, eager to transform Utah's mountains into the next Aspen. But Redford had different plans. He envisioned a sanctuary where art and nature could coexist, where filmmakers could escape the commercial pressures of Hollywood and reconnect with authentic storytelling. That vision eventually birthed the Sundance Film Festival, which would revolutionize independent cinema and discover talents like Quentin Tarantino, the Coen brothers, and countless others. When estate archivists finally gained access to the main residence, they found themselves walking through what felt like a private museum. Room after room contained treasures that had never been publicly displayed. The Native American art collection alone was staggering. Pottery from ancient Puebloan cultures, intricately woven Navajo rugs spanning 10 feet, ceremonial masks, and beadwork that dated back centuries. Historians who examined the collection estimated its value in the tens of millions, calling it one of the most significant private holdings of indigenous art in North America. Redford had acquired these pieces quietly over decades, often working directly with Native artists and communities, ensuring fair compensation and proper provenance. But the most remarkable discovery came in the form of legal documents found in Redford's personal study. Conservation easements, meticulously drafted and legally binding, designated vast portions of his land to remain forever wild. No development, no commercialization. These weren't casual environmental gestures. They were permanent declarations that this land would outlive him untouched, a gift to future generations. Estate lawyers realized that Redford hadn't just owned property. He'd waged a quiet, decades-long campaign to preserve the American West, one legal document at a time. While Sundance was his spiritual home, Redford's property portfolio extended far beyond Utah's mountains. Over 6 decades, he assembled a real estate empire that reflected both financial savvy and deeply held principles. Unlike typical Hollywood acquisitions, flashy mansions meant for magazine spreads, Redford's properties served strategic purposes, often tied to conservation and privacy. His coastal retreat in Northern California occupied 30 acres of dramatic cliffside overlooking the Pacific. Here, weathered gray shingles and expansive decks blended into the landscape, designed to feel like part of the coastline rather than imposed upon it. In Napa Valley, he owned vineyard properties that he never commercialized, instead leasing to sustainable wine growers who shared his environmental values. Back in Utah, researchers discovered he'd quietly acquired dozens of smaller parcels surrounding Sundance, strategic purchases that created buffer zones, preventing encroachment and protecting watersheds. What made these holdings extraordinary wasn't their value, estimated collectively at over $100 million, but the legal structure surrounding them. Nearly every property came with conservation easements or restrictive covenants. Redford had systematically ensured that future owners couldn't develop, subdivide, or commercialize these lands. He'd essentially removed them from the speculative real estate market forever, prioritizing ecological preservation over investment returns. For estate lawyers, this created unprecedented complexity. How do you value property that can never be fully exploited? How do you divide assets when the owner's intent was that they never be divided? Some parcels were held in family trusts, others in non-profit conservation organizations, still others in Baroque legal structures designed to outlast any individual heir. One lawyer, speaking anonymously, admitted the estate could take a decade to fully settle, calling it the most intentionally complicated property portfolio I've encountered in 30 years of practice. Yet this complexity was entirely intentional. Redford wasn't simply acquiring real estate. He was deploying wealth as an environmental weapon, using property law to achieve what legislation often couldn't. Each deed, each easement, each trust document represented another small victory in his lifelong battle to preserve wild places. His real estate empire wasn't about accumulation. It was about permanent subtraction from the forces of development and exploitation. In 1989, Robert Redford launched the Sundance Catalog, envisioning a marketplace that connected American consumers with authentic artisans, jewelers, furniture makers, weavers, and craftspeople who valued quality over mass production. The catalog featured leather journals, handmade turquoise jewelry, Pendleton blankets, and furniture crafted from reclaimed wood. It was quintessentially Redford, a commercial venture infused with idealism, celebrating craftsmanship in an increasingly disposable culture. For 2 decades, the catalog thrived, becoming a beloved institution for customers who valued authenticity. But by the 2010s, the retail landscape had shifted dramatically. Online shopping and fast fashion eroded the market for expensive handmade goods. The catalog struggled to adapt, hemorrhaging money despite Redford's periodic cash infusions. In early 2025, just months before his death, Sundance Catalog announced the closure of its 16 remaining U.S. stores, citing unsustainable losses. Estate documents revealed the full extent of the financial damage. The catalog operation had accumulated debts approaching $12 million, unpaid vendor invoices, lease obligations, and severance packages for laid-off employees. Dozens of small artisans who'd supplied the catalog found themselves with outstanding invoices, some dating back months. The dream of supporting craftspeople had, ironically, left many of them financially stranded. This financial fallout now complicates Redford's estate. Some creditors argue that personal guarantees make the estate liable for catalog debts. Others point to corporate separations that should shield personal assets. The legal wrangling could drag on for years, consuming significant legal fees and tarnishing what should have been a straightforward inheritance. The catalog's collapse carries a deeper poignancy. It represented Redford's belief that commerce could be ethical, that businesses could prioritize values over profits. Its failure doesn't indict those values, but it underscores their fragility in an economic system built on different principles. Even icons with boundless idealism can't reshape market forces through will alone. The catalog became one of Redford's unfinished chapters, a vision that outlived its viability, leaving behind both inspiration and red ink. Beyond the Native American artifacts in his main residence, archivists discovered additional collections scattered across Redford's properties that transformed the estate into something resembling a cultural institution. In a climate-controlled storage facility near Sundance, they found hundreds of Western landscape paintings, not household names, but serious regional artists whose work documented the American West across decades. Redford had been collecting them quietly, often purchasing directly from artists struggling for recognition. But the most extraordinary discovery came in what family members called the Vault, a secure room in Sundance's basement containing decades of personal papers. Archival boxes held correspondence dating back to the 1960s. Letters from Paul Newman debating dialogue in Butch Cassidy. Notes from Sidney Pollack about directorial choices in Out of Africa. Messages from Jane Fonda discussing the politics of filmmaking. These weren't celebrity fan mail. They were working documents that chronicled the creative process behind American cinema's most celebrated films. Among these papers were Redford's own journals, leather-bound volumes filled with his distinctive handwriting. Early entries documented his struggles as a young actor in New York, living in walk-ups and surviving on determination. Later volumes revealed his private thoughts on fame, environmental destruction, and the corrupting influence of money in politics. One particularly poignant entry from 2018 expressed fears that his life's environmental work might prove futile. "Have I been shouting into the wind all these years? The ice still melts, the forests still burn." Archivists also discovered screenplay drafts and film treatments Redford had been developing in his final years. One project, tentatively titled The Last River, explored climate refugees in the American Southwest, combining thriller elements with environmental commentary. Another examined Native American land rights through the lens of a contemporary legal battle. These weren't casual notes. They were fully developed treatments, some running 70 pages, suggesting Redford remained actively creative until his final months. The cultural significance of these discoveries extends beyond monetary value. Scholars are calling for portions to be digitized and made publicly accessible, arguing they constitute primary historical documents about American cinema, environmental activism, and artistic process. The estate now faces delicate decisions about privacy, legacy, and public interest, questions Redford never explicitly answered, leaving his heirs to navigate the tension between protecting his private thoughts and sharing his intellectual contributions with the world. Robert Redford's public activism was well documented: his founding of the Sundance Institute, his environmental advocacy, his support for Native American rights. But estate documents revealed a parallel philanthropic universe that he deliberately kept hidden, preferring anonymous generosity to public recognition. Bank records showed systematic donations totaling tens of millions over decades, scholarships for Native American students studying environmental science, grants to small conservation organizations working to protect specific watersheds and wildlife corridors, support for independent bookstores and small theaters in rural communities, funding for investigative journalism projects exposing environmental crimes. The breadth was staggering, touching dozens of causes and hundreds of organizations, almost all receiving support without public acknowledgement. The Sundance Institute received the largest bequest. Estate documents designated $50 million to ensure the organization's permanent endowment. This gift guarantees the festival and its year-round programs can operate independently of commercial pressures, exactly as Redford intended when he founded it in 1981. Additional millions were earmarked for emerging filmmaker grants, ensuring future generations would have the support he'd provided for decades. Lawyers also discovered a network of what they termed contingent bequests, promises to organizations that would activate upon his death. Environmental nonprofits across the West received surprise notifications of substantial gifts, some exceeding 7 figures. Indigenous art programs, youth environmental education initiatives, and film preservation projects all discovered themselves sudden beneficiaries of Redford's foresight. This systematic anonymity revealed something essential about his character. In an era when billionaires affixed their names to buildings and universities, Redford chose obscurity. He viewed philanthropy not as legacy building, but as obligation, the responsibility of wealth to serve larger purposes. One close friend, interviewed after his death, recalled Redford's explanation: "If they know it's from me, it becomes about me. I want it to be about the work." Even his estate's structure honored this principle, designating that many gifts remain anonymous even after his death, his generosity continuing to flow invisibly into the causes he championed. Robert Redford's immediate family consists of 2 daughters, Shauna and Amy, and several grandchildren. His sons, Scott and James, both preceded him in death, losses that profoundly shaped his later years and added emotional complexity to inheritance questions. Unlike some celebrity estates torn apart by competing heirs, early indications suggest the Redford family remains unified in honoring his wishes. Yet the estate structure creates inherent complications. The conservation easements dramatically reduce the monetary value of property assets, meaning heirs inherit land they cannot develop or sell at market rates. Philanthropic bequests claim substantial portions of liquid assets, leaving less available for direct inheritance. The Sundance catalog debts may ultimately reduce what remains. In some ways, Redford's heirs inherit more responsibility than wealth: the burden of managing complex trusts, conservation properties, and his multifaceted legacy. Legal experts note that family unity could be tested as the full financial picture emerges. Early estate valuations suggested substantial wealth, but after accounting for debts, philanthropic designations, and restricted properties, the actual inheritable assets may prove surprisingly modest. Some assets exist in legal limbo, partially owned by nonprofits, subject to conservation restrictions, or entangled in the catalog's bankruptcy proceedings. The emotional inheritance may prove more valuable than the financial one. Redford's daughters inherit their father's environmental mission, his commitment to independent film, and his role as a cultural voice for integrity in American life. They become custodians of archives that document pivotal moments in cinema history. They inherit the responsibility of stewardship, ensuring Sundance continues thriving, that conservation lands remain protected, that his philanthropic vision endures. One estate lawyer noted the profound irony. Redford spent a lifetime ensuring his wealth would serve larger purposes. His heirs inherit that purpose more than the wealth itself. Rather than a fortune to spend, they receive a framework for continuing his work, a structure that channels resources toward causes he championed. It's an inheritance that demands engagement rather than consumption, precisely the kind of legacy Redford would have designed. Even after announcing his retirement from acting in 2018, Robert Redford never truly stopped creating. The discovered screenplays and film treatments reveal a mind that remained engaged with storytelling until the very end, wrestling with the same themes that defined his career: institutional corruption, environmental crisis, and the struggle for justice in an imperfect world. The Last River, his climate change thriller, was the most developed project, a 70-page treatment complete with character sketches and scene breakdowns. Set in 2035, it followed water refugees fleeing drought-stricken regions of the Southwest, pursued by corporate security forces protecting privatized water sources. The treatment blended Chinatown's noir sensibilities with contemporary environmental urgency, suggesting Redford remained intellectually sharp and creatively ambitious. Other projects existed in earlier developmental stages. One explored the Navajo code talkers, emphasizing aspects of their story typically omitted from popular narratives. Another examined judicial corruption in rural America, inspired by real cases Redford had researched for years. These weren't vanity projects. They addressed urgent contemporary issues through compelling narrative frameworks. Correspondence found in the archives revealed Redford had been mentoring younger filmmakers, offering detailed feedback on their scripts and connecting them with funding sources. Letters to directors like Ava DuVernay and Ryan Coogler showed him engaging deeply with their work, offering encouragement and wisdom accumulated over 6 decades. His creative legacy extended beyond his own projects to his investment in others' visions. The question now facing his estate is what happens to these unfinished works. Some family members favor sealing them permanently, viewing them as private creative explorations never meant for public consumption. Others argue for selective release, potentially allowing trusted collaborators to develop certain projects as posthumous tributes. Film historians desperately want access, seeing them as important documents of artistic process and social consciousness. Whatever the decision, these projects symbolize something essential about Redford: his creative restlessness, his refusal to coast on past accomplishments, his conviction that storytelling could illuminate truth and inspire change. He died not as a retired legend, but as an active artist, still wrestling with how cinema could address the world's deepest challenges. Among the estate's most precious discoveries were personal letters that illuminated Redford's inner life and Hollywood's most celebrated friendships. His correspondence with Paul Newman, spanning 4 decades, revealed 2 men who pushed each other creatively while maintaining deep mutual respect. They debated politics, shared frustrations about the industry's commercialization, and compared notes on aging, mortality, and legacy. Newman's final letter to Redford, written months before his 2008 death, was discovered still in its unopened envelope, Redford apparently unable to face reading it. Letters from Sidney Pollack, his frequent director and close friend, documented their creative collaboration on 7 films. They argued passionately about character motivations, debated narrative choices, and challenged each other's assumptions. One exchange about Out of Africa showed Pollack pushing Redford toward greater emotional vulnerability, while Redford resisted exposing what he considered excessive sentimentality. Their friendship clearly thrived on productive tension. Family correspondence revealed Redford's struggles with fame and his determination to protect his children from its corrupting influence. Letters to his son James, written during the young man's battles with illness, showed a father's raw vulnerability and helplessness. Notes to his daughters offered guidance, encouragement, and apologies for absences required by his career. These weren't polished statements. They were authentic expressions of love, fear, regret, and hope. Particularly moving were journal entries that functioned like letters to himself. Redford wrestled with doubt about whether his activism made any difference, questioned whether fame had damaged his ability to connect authentically with others, and expressed fears about his environmental work proving futile against corporate power and political corruption. One entry from 2020 read, "Have I been a good father, a good actor, a good steward, or just a man who tried hard and fell short in all 3? These personal documents reveal Redford as fully human, brilliant but uncertain, committed but occasionally despairing, successful but never satisfied. They complicate simplistic hero narratives, showing someone who struggled with the same doubts and fears as anyone else, who questioned his choices and worried about his legacy. In their honesty and vulnerability, they may constitute his most valuable bequest, permission for future generations to embrace complexity, acknowledge doubt, and continue striving despite uncertainty. The discovery of assets and treasures came with sobering counterpoints, debts, liabilities, and legal entanglements that cast unexpected shadows over Redford's estate. Beyond the Sundance catalog's $12 million in obligations, estate lawyers uncovered minor lawsuits, unresolved contracts, and financial guarantees that could expose the estate to additional claims. Some debts were prosaic: property taxes on multiple holdings, unpaid consulting fees, routine business obligations. Others proved more complicated. Certain conservation easements came with ongoing maintenance requirements that now burden heirs with annual costs exceeding six figures. Philanthropic pledges made years earlier created moral, if not legal, obligations that the estate feels compelled to honor despite financial pressures. The probate process is expected to consume years and millions in legal fees. Determining which debts are personal versus business liabilities requires untangling decades of financial structures. Creditors are testing legal separations, hoping to access deeper pockets than corporate bankruptcy allows. Conservation trusts need restructuring to ensure long-term sustainability. Philanthropic bequests require careful timing to minimize tax liabilities while honoring Redford's intent. Estate lawyers privately acknowledge that the final inheritable value may prove substantially less than initial estimates suggested. The combination of restricted properties, philanthropic designations, and unexpected debts could reduce the estate's liquid value by 60% or more. What appeared to be a $200 million legacy might ultimately distribute closer to $80 million after all obligations are satisfied. Still substantial, but far less than the Hollywood icon's public profile might suggest. These financial complications don't diminish Redford's legacy. They humanize it. They reveal someone who prioritized values over wealth accumulation, who sometimes allowed idealism to override financial prudence, who believed certain principles justified economic sacrifice. The debts and entanglements aren't failures, but the inevitable consequences of a life lived deliberately, choosing meaning over money, legacy over liquidity. Conclusion: what was found in Robert Redford's estate defies simple categorization. It's simultaneously a treasure trove and a burden, a celebration and a complication, an ending and a beginning. Priceless artifacts sit alongside unpaid bills. Conservation triumphs coexist with business failures. Creative brilliance shares space with financial headaches. Perhaps this complexity is fitting. Redford himself resisted simplification throughout his life, insisting on nuance in his performances, his activism, and his relationships. His estate reflects the same refusal to be easily understood or neatly packaged. It challenges us to embrace contradiction, to celebrate his environmental victories while acknowledging business failures, to honor his creative legacy while recognizing financial complications, to remember him as both visionary and vulnerable, icon and human being. The estate's ultimate value isn't measured in dollars, but in the blueprint it provides for lives worth living. Lives committed to something larger than personal accumulation. Lives that prioritize meaning over convenience. Lives that leave the world changed rather than simply impressed. Robert Redford's true inheritance isn't property or possessions, but the example of a complicated, committed, thoroughly human life in pursuit of beauty, justice, and truth. And that legacy, unlike any estate, can never be fully calculated or finally closed.